So there's a lot to say about this clip, and I'm going to go through it again and I'll stop. But I just wanted you to hear what he said. Yes, he said he doesn't care if Hunter Biden, there's evidence that he murdered children. He doesn't care. He doesn't care if his dad was getting kickbacks from his business in places like Ukraine or China. He's happy that there was a left-wing conspiracy to censor the Hunter Biden laptop story until after the election because we had to do everything possible to stop Trump from being elected. That's what he said. I mean, that's mind-blowing in both how corrupt it is and the honesty of it. And this is how millions of Democrats feel. And I've been saying it for a long, long time. So let's go back, right? And let's stop to the points that I want to stop and do this again. So let's start it over. You ready?
I mean, Hunter Biden, at that point, Hunter Biden literally could have had the corpses of children in his basement. I would not have cared, right? It's like, there's nothing. First of all, it's Hunter Biden.
Right. That's the point. So I'll defend Sam Harris here a little, right? Because the reason he's saying that is, well, I wasn't electing Hunter Biden. I was electing Joe Biden. And Joe shouldn't be responsible totally for the sins of his son. Partially true. If it's his son mass murdering people, and this was proven on that laptop, and the laptop also proves, which we know, that there were communications between Hunter Biden and Joe Biden regarding some of these business dealings, then we would have to seriously ask ourselves, what did Joe Biden know about his son murdering children? But let's just defend Sam and steelman his position here as much as possible and say, he's saying that no matter how heinous the action, if it's not the person he's voting for, he doesn't care about it. So I actually, even though I find this to be a stupid comment, it's not the comment that's the most worrying to me. So I'll just skip by it, to be honest.
Biden, right? It's not Joe Biden, but even if whatever scope of Joe Biden's corruption is, like if we could just go down that rabbit hole endlessly and understand that he's getting kickbacks from Hunter Biden's deals in Ukraine or wherever else, right, or China, it is infinitesimal compared to the corruption we know Trump is involved in. It's like a firefly to the sun, right? I mean, like there's just. It doesn't even stack up against Trump University.
All right, so let's talk about this for a second. So he says the corruption that we know Trump's committed, but the only thing that he outlines is Trump University. So let's make Trump University sound as bad as possible. Let's say that Trump created a university to intentionally defraud people that he knew was going to register in that university, many of which were poor and working class people that he was seeking to intentionally defraud and bankrupt them. Now, I don't think that that's what's definitively been proven, but let's say that's true. He says everything that Joe Biden's been accused of pales in comparison to that one thing alone. And he says there's other things, but he doesn't list any of the other corruption that we know of Trump. What's he going to talk about? Russia collusion that's been debunked? Scott Adams talks about this a lot. They have this laundry list. They say Trump did all of these bad things, so that proves that he's just ridiculously the worst. And you're like, okay, tell me the things he did. He told people to drink bleach. No, he didn't. He said Nazis were good people. No, he didn't. He illegally colluded with Russia to steal the election. No, he didn't. He said all Mexicans are rapists. No, he didn't. He made fun of a mentally challenged reporter. No, he didn't. But they list all this stuff off, and their media went with it, and so everyone's just like, Let's talk about one of the things that what the laptop could potentially prove, because he said anything that the laptop could have shown that Joe Biden's been accused of. He particularly mentions the thing that's the most troubling, which is if he was involved with Hunter Biden's business deals in Ukraine and Russia. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that Joe Biden admitted to using a $1 billion quid pro quo to fire a prosecutor that was looking into his son's business in Ukraine, which was owned by someone the Obama administration called a corrupt Russian oligarch, a man by the name of Zlochevsky. That means if Joe Biden was getting kickbacks from the money that Hunter Biden, something that Sam Harris says that could be true. Let's assume that's true. What Sam Harris is saying here is, if Joe Biden was using $1 billion of our tax dollars to fire a prosecutor looking into his son so that his son could keep getting money and sending a percentage of that money back to the vice president, Sam Harris says Trump University is worse than that. If Hunter Biden was involved with the communist government of China, our biggest geopolitical threat, and was getting money from them and giving kickbacks to his father for his father to sell access to the highest levels of government, our greatest enemy, our greatest geopolitical enemy. And if Joe Biden's personally enriching himself, selling access to the Chinese to benefit the government of China, our greatest enemy, over the people of the United States, Sam Harris says that's not a big deal. That's not a big of deal as Trump University. Now, although if I steelman the position and say, yes, defrauding people that tried to attend a university is incredibly an immoral thing to do, that doesn't speak to possible corruption of his governance. Unlike these stories about Joe Biden giving your tax dollars away, selling access to your government. And Sam Harris says Trump University is worse than all of that. So on the premise that he's issuing, he's objectively wrong. Trump University, the person who did Trump University becoming president, is less fearful than the person, if we're accepting that both of these could be true, the person who sold out the government to our greatest enemy and gave $1 billion of your tax dollars to ensure that he kept getting kickbacks from a corrupt Russian. That person is far more dangerous in a governmental position. Yeah, right. If Trump University is immoral, then yeah, how many left-winger universities are as well? I agree. So on his original, so what he's going to do is build from this premise. So his premise is Trump is so much more evil than Joe Biden that it justifies the corruption. That's what he's going to say. Well, he's wrong on the case he outlined and the parameters he outlined. Even if Biden did all of these terrible things, it's still not as bad as Trump University. He's objectively wrong. So already, now even if he was right, it doesn't justify corruption to stop Trump. But he's not even right. That's the point I'm making. Moving on.
Right. Trump University as a story is worse than anything that could be in Hunter Biden's laptop, in my view. Right. Now, that doesn't answer the people who say it's still completely unfair to not have looked at the laptop in a timely way and to have shut down the New York Post's Twitter account like that. That's just a conspiracy. That's a left-wing conspiracy to deny the presidency to Donald Trump. Absolutely, it was. Absolutely, right.
Now, notice when Sam thinks what's happening here, and this happens. I don't know much about this show he's on, but I've noticed this. When I debate a left-winger one-on-one, I get a different type of interaction than I get in other settings, right? And that's because they intuitively know that the odds are at least even as far as the percentage of people involved in the conversation and what their beliefs are, right? And so what happens is they always take this more of a neutral stance. They'll still be hacks like Pisco was last night, and they'll still, oh, my side's always right, your side's always wrong. But it'll come with a veneer of fairness. Right? But many times when they feel they're in a bubble, they'll talk how they really want. So a lot of times if I get on a panel, I'll just be quiet. Not a lot. I talk an awful lot. But sometimes if you're on a panel and it's almost all left-wingers, sometimes it's amazing to sit there and listen to them. When they're on their own group and they're spurring people on. Yeah, I think maybe we should, go after Trump people. Maybe we should go after and investigate if they're extremists. Yeah, and you know what? Maybe there should be some sort of re-education. Yeah, maybe we should consider that they're not allowed to homeschool their children or something like that because they're indoctrinating them. Maybe they shouldn't have children. And how it escalates as they bounce ideas off each other one-on-one. And you start to get a little insight. Remember the Project Veritas video where you had the campaign worker for Bernie saying, oh yeah, when Bernie's talking about education, we're talking about re-education camps for conservatives. For Trump supporters. Oh, that's one of the things we're talking about. Because they're in their little bubble. They don't have to worry about keeping up appearances. Oh, we have to have the appearance of impartiality and fairness when we're talking to people that maybe aren't in our bubble. But when you're in your bubble, sometimes even when you consciously know, well, yeah, I'm in my bubble, but this is going to be broadcast to people outside my bubble, but you still feel comfortable in the moment. So that's what just happened here with Sam Harris. Sam Harris just told you what he really thinks. Now, there's a couple key notes here because what you're about to see is Sam's going to start to immediately be like, oh shit. That's what he's going to do, right? Because you could see the expression on these two guys' face. I don't know if they're traditionally left-wing, right-wing, but it seems that Sam got comfortable here. And so once they're like, wait, what? You're for corruption to impede our democracy? You're for that? For a conspiracy to do that? Sam's going to be like, well, it's not just left-wing, and I don't know that I would call it a conspiracy. Let me play back, before we get to that point, let me play back what Sam just said. Listen to the words he himself chooses.
Down the New York Post's Twitter account like that. That's just a conspiracy. That's a left-wing conspiracy to deny the presidency to Donald Trump. Absolutely, it was. Absolutely, right. But I think it was warranted, right. And
he admits that he considers that a left-wing conspiracy and says it was warranted. Now, what's he specifically talking about? He's talking about intel agents that lied and said that this was Russian misinformation, the Hunter Biden laptop story. He's talking about governmental agents and Democrat politicians saying the same and pressuring companies to shut the story down. He's talking about media outlets like the NPR refusing to cover it. And he's talking about social media companies censoring not only regular people like me that wanted to talk about that story, but also America's oldest newspaper, the New York Post. That's what this left-wing conspiracy was. And Sam Harris says, you're right, that was a left-wing conspiracy, but it was absolutely necessary because we had to stop Trump from being elected. And then he's going to, when these people are like, wait, what? Huh? Excuse me? He's going to be like, was it? It wasn't just left wings. And the dude's like, okay, that's irrelevant. Sure, there were some never Trump right wingers like Liz Cheney, but that's irrelevant. You saying you're cheering for a conspiracy of all these powerful institutions to intentionally lie and censor people so that their preferred candidate could win because you feel that other candidate was so evil we had to do that. And he goes, well, I don't know that I would call it a conspiracy. You just did, Sam. You just said it absolutely is a conspiracy, but it was necessary. So his only defense is backtracking and saying, I don't know that I would use the word conspiracy. It's something you'll see last night in my debate with Pisco. They always default to this semantic argument then. We'll look at his Twitter feed. So let's finish up here.
And again, it's a coin toss as to whether or not.
Sam,
look at this guy's face. He's like, wait, what? What did you just say? Excuse me?
sorry.
That particular piece.
I'm really sorry. I was the one that said we should move on, but you've just
look, he
said
like
something
smiles. He's
I
like,
really
what?
struggle
Go for
with
it.
there, which is
The kids in the basement?
No. Fuck the kids in the basement.
Now look at how smug Sam is when he says that he's confident. He's like, yeah, kids in the basement. Because to someone who's really critically thinking about it, that's a statement that's hyperbolic, and it's not the troubling thing that Sam said. So Sam's really confident right now. And for someone who's supposedly this deep intellectual, it's amazing that Sam can't see immediately what the problem is with what he just said and what this person's going to say. Wait a minute, there's a problem here, right? Sam has no clue yet. Watch his expression change here.
I'm interested in democracy. You're saying you are content with a left-wing conspiracy to prevent somebody being democratically re-elected as president.
Well, no, I'm content. Well, so it's...
Not so smug now. Posture's a little different.
But the thing is, it's just not left-wing, right? So Liz Cheney is not left-wing, right? Liz Cheney is doing everything in her power.
You're content with a conspiracy to prevent somebody being democratically
it's not.
How is that a defense? Like, this guy's clearly his position is he doesn't give a shit if it's left or right wing. Sam Harris just said there was a conspiracy of all of these groups to lie and censor to keep Donald Trump from winning. And this guy's like, that seems to be a serious attack on our democracy, right? And Sam's like, well, it wasn't just left-wingers. Now, Sam thinks that that's a defense. Just like this moron, this D's nut guy, right, that's in here that's like, oh, well, Trump appointed Christopher Wray, so it must be all, it can't be corrupt, right? Sam Harris thinks, well, hey, if a right-winger also didn't want Trump to be elected, that proves that he should have been elected. That's what Sam's defense here is. Oh, I see your problem. You think it was just Democrats. No, there were never Trump Republicans like Liz Cheney and Adam Kissinger, so we're all good, right? And this guy's like, no, that's not the issue. Again, it's funny. The same people that want to accuse me of just being a Trump sycophant or just a partisan hack, you can see why they do that, because that's what they're projecting, what they themselves are. Sam Harris thinks the objection to him admitting that he was for a conspiracy to lie and censor the American people to install Joe Biden as president. He thinks that the problem that someone would have with that is, oh, I'm sorry, you think it was just left-wingers. No, there were never Trump right-wingers as well. And this guy's like, no, I'm not looking at it as left versus right. I'm looking at, you just said you're for a conspiracy to basically lie and censor the American people to install the person you want as president. And Sam, it doesn't even occur to Sam until this guy outlines it like that.
No, but there's nothing conspiracy. It's not. It was a conspiracy out in the open. But it doesn't matter if it was. It doesn't matter what part's conspiracy, what part's out in the open. I mean, I think it's like, if people get together and talk about what should we do about this phenomenon, if it's like if there was an asteroid hurtling toward Earth, and we got in a room together with all of our friends and had a conversation about what we could do to deflect its course, right? Is that a conspiracy? Like some of.
It's irrelevant, the term we use. Right? And this is something that you'll see a lot with the left. And Sam knows this. This is the ironic thing. Sam absolutely knows this because of the nature of things he's talked about. And I've seen Sam on podcasts with people like Brett Weinstein that heavily talks about how people and institutions want to control our language. And I happen to know the smallest amount about this because I did go and got a master's degree in speech communication. I didn't learn much, so don't think that means shit. I basically have one more week of training than the average person on speech. But language is very important. And by controlling, even if you read 1984, right? If you control language, you control thought. So when you can change the definitions of words to suit your ideological goals, it's very powerful. And you see this occur, like, are we in a recession? Well, we used to understand that a recession was 2 quarters of negative growth. Not anymore. The inflation's just transitory. What's transitory mean? It's been here for months. We've changed the definition of man and woman. We've changed the definition of mother. We've changed the definition of spy. We've changed the definition of raid. So now Sam, who says, I'm for a conspiracy to stop Trump from being elected, when called out, he's like, well, do we technically call that a conspiracy? Because he understands that if he could make this an argument of semantics, he could get out of the thrust of what's troubling about what he just said. And it's difficult to do in the moment when you're having it. It's a very effective tactic to obfuscate what you're trying to talk about. And it's something that Pisco does very well. Pisco not only uses semantic arguments, but he'll actually use all sorts of minutiae. He makes you slog through something, right? So instead of just admitting, again, I go back to the first time I talked to Pisco about sort of FBI corruption. And I asked him a simple question. I said, before the FBI uses evidence to get a warrant, should they try to verify it? He literally talked for 6 minutes. On and on and on and on and on and on. Not even remotely answering the question. I sit there patiently. And then I was like, why couldn't you just say yes or no? And then you could elaborate, but you didn't say yes or no. You know, an example from last night's discussion I had with Pisco, right? We're talking about the dossier being the crucial item that was used to spy on Carter Page. Now, he admits that the dossier was unverified. He admits that Comey ultimately said that now knowing that that evidence wasn't true in the dossier, he thinks that the FISA warrants were bad, that he wouldn't have signed off on them. He admits that they were unable to get a warrant until they had the FISA warrant. Yet, he went for 25 minutes going, but there were other factors. Like what? Well, 1, Russia tried to interfere. What does that have to do with Carter Page? Okay. 2, they talked to George Papadopoulos. Again, what does that have to do with Carter Page? Okay. 3, how about this? Carter Page had been in Russia and worked there. Okay. And then, there was the dossier accusing Carter Page of being a Russian spy. And then number 5, you ready for this? In October, after the first warrant, you ready for this? Carter Page admitted that a Russian offered to bankroll a business for him. All of those things could be true. None of that is indicative to saying this dude is a spy that we need to have a FISA warrant on. The only thing they had alleging that was the dossier. Yet it took 30 minutes to get to that point. Like, all of this is irrelevant, Pisco. Yeah, there's a bunch of circumstantial stuff that isn't even evidence of any crime whatsoever committed by Carter Page that also exist. It would be dumb enough to say things like this. It was like, there was a dossier that said that Carter Page killed Seth Rich, right? And Pisco's like, well, that's not the only evidence. One, guns can kill people when they shoot them. No shit. Why are we discussing this? Or when we're talking about the warrant. And, I'm like, look, if it's just presidential record stuff, no, I don't feel that this justifies. If it's non-classified stuff. And he's like, what if Trump stole the Declaration of Independence? That's just obfuscating. It's drawing it out. It's trying to muddy the conversation. Most of their tactics is to just not talk to you. Destiny won't talk to me. He knows what will happen if he talks to me about the FBI raid. He knows he'll be crushed. He knows that he is incapable of defending it. He understands it. It's why he won't talk to me about Burisma. It's why he won't talk to me about the vaccine mandates. He knows these are he's seen what I've said. He doesn't want to touch it because I'm right. And even if he thinks I'm not right in his head, which he probably knows I'm right, but even if he thinks I'm not, he knows that he could not win that position convincingly. But some people like Pisco will debate you, and this is a tactic you learned in policy debate when I did policy debate in college. If you're debating someone better than you, muddy up the debate. Do everything you can to make it messy. Red herrings left and right. And some debaters that were better than me are very skilled at being able to scalpel through that. Like, nope, this is irrelevant, staying to the main point. I'm not the best at that, I'll admit. I get sucked in to all this irrelevant stuff. I'm not as bad as some other people. I still think I focus primarily on my points. But you see what I'm saying. That's what Sam's doing here. Sam, you just said you're for corruption of all of these major institutions collaborating together to lie and censor the American people so that the person you want is installed as president. Well, is that technically a conspiracy? Would you call that a conspiracy? Yeah, I would. Anyways, it doesn't matter what I would call it. It's not the term. When you get to what these semantic arguments are, it's not the term that we're concerned with. Now, it's easy. Language is important to humans, right? And we need to label things. It's inherent in how we talk. It's inherent to our language, right? That we have to have labels for things. And I, all the time, am imprecise with my language. So I'll say something like this. The left does this. And then someone in my chat will say this. Well, not everyone on the left. Yes, of course, not everyone on the left. Well, actually, there's not a left in the United States based on how I define it. Right, we could have a 20-minute argument on what the left, but everybody knows what I'm saying basically in general. If you have a few questions to clarify, fine, I'll say it, but everybody in general knows what I'm talking about. And you can see how this applies to other things. Trump is a fascist. He's a fascist, and that's bad. Fascism is bad. We all understand that. We'd say, okay, fascism is bad. But it's not just that the word fascist is bad. It's that the actions that fascists take are bad. Right? Now that sounds like, of course, Rob, that's stupid. Why would you make that distinction? Because the distinction is when we then look at another group, right? If we say, well, the FBI is behaving as fascist, they'll say things like this. No, because fascism has to be right-wing. Well, it doesn't matter if we're technically, however you want to change the definition. What I'm talking about is the things that we historically say are bad about fascists are that they're authoritarian, that they have double standards, that they use violence and intimidation to control the population. That's what's happening right now with groups on the left. Now, you might not call that fascism, but when we criticize fascism, these are the things we're talking about. It's what's so absurd about the debate with Antifa. Well, Antifa can't be fascist because they call themselves anti-fascist. And yet they engage in the very tactics that makes us dislike fascists. They use violence and intimidation to silence people that disagree with them. When we talk about disliking fascism, that's the main thing that we're talking about. So whether or not we allow them to have this semantic argument, that's what we're criticizing. The same here is, hey, Sam Harris, we're not criticizing the word conspiracy. We're criticizing your belief that all of our major institutions, such as the intel agencies, politicians on both sides, as you admit, the mainstream media, and our social media companies coming together to lie and censor the American people so that you could have the president you want installed is a bad thing. You could choose to call it a conspiracy or not, but the action, not the label, is what we're criticizing. And it's telling that the only response Sam has is to play semantics. Which again, in all three of the major positions here, Sam is incredibly wrong. One, he is wrong about the fact that he says everything that could be accused of Biden in the laptop, even taking money in kickbacks from Ukraine and China, pales in comparison to Trump University. It does not. That is objectively wrong. You could subjectively say, I find one is more immoral than the other. I find that the Trump thing's more immoral. But if we're talking about objective standard of what would be more danger of presidents, you could find it to be the most immoral thing in the world to leave your pregnant wife. I wouldn't disagree. I would find that to be disgusting behavior. Oh, my wife's 6 months pregnant. I cheated on her. I left her. Sorry, you're on your own. And then not pay child support. That's incredibly immoral. You may find that more immoral than getting kickbacks from the Chinese government. It's true, you may. But when saying, which of those people would you trust to be president more? The person that cheated on his wife and left her high and dry when pregnant? Or the person that is actively taking kickbacks from our greatest geopolitical rival? I would say, even though I might consider the former more immoral, the one that cheated and left his wife like that, clearly I would have less reservations about the particulars of governing than the guy who's taking kickbacks from our greatest enemy. Now let's see what Sam's response is. So then Sam takes to Twitter today because the backlash has been pretty brutal from Sam Harris. I mean, even people like Brett Weinstein that were on the intellectual dark web with him, like, wait, what? What are you saying? So let's see what Sam Harris's response is. And his response is actually not going to help whatsoever because one, it's just the only thing that you could respect out of all this with Sam Harris is at least he's honest. He gave away the game. At least I respect that. Yeah, I think that Trump and his supporters are evil, and we should lie to them, and we should censor them, and install who we want as president. Despicable, grotesque, but honest. That's better than believing that and then saying, "Oh no, there wasn't an effort. No, that didn't happen. They weren't censoring people. No, they weren't doing that." That's what I get from people like Pisco. That's worse. Now let's see what Sam Harris says in his defense, right? So that's the first thing. So he tries to weasel out of it, but then he doesn't. He kind of, in a weird way, in the worst possible way, he shows that he's a sniveling coward by giving the appearance of weaseling out. But when you read what he actually says, he doesn't weasel out. So let's read what he says. We'll go through this quickly. Sam Harris from today says, "There's a podcast clip circulating that seems to be confusing many people about my views on Trump, which is understandable because I wasn't speaking very clearly." That's not true. He spoke very clearly. It doesn't get much clearer than saying anything that Biden could have done that he was accused of, I don't think it was as important as Trump University. And I was for left-wingers coming together in a conspiracy to censor and lie to people to keep Trump from office. That's clear. That's not ambiguous language. That was very clear language. He could say, I misspoke, I was wrong, but he can't say it wasn't clear. It was clear. It was absolutely clear. He says, "For what it worth, here's what I was trying to say." Okay. "I was essentially arguing for a principle of self-defense, where there's a continuum of proportionate force that is appropriate and necessary to use. I've always viewed Trump as a very dangerous person to elect as president of a fake university." So what he's saying here is, well, it's defending myself because if Trump gets in office, the damage to me and people like me would be so severe that I have to do everything possible, including lie, cheat, steal, to make sure that that guy doesn't get out. So it's a self-defense principle. That still doesn't morally justify cheating, censoring, lying, etc., engaging in a conspiracy to prevent that person from being elected, right? Many of the criticisms that you would have that you would say makes Trump a bad person is that he would engage in the very behavior that you're claiming. Again, this is the same mentality that groups like Antifa use. Fascists are bad because they'll use violence. Therefore, we'll preemptively use violence against them. Oh, and by the way, everyone who disagrees with us is a fascist. Sam Harris is effectively making the same argument. I assume that Trump would have been horrible for the country, so I'm morally justified in being corrupt and fighting back. Preemptively. Now, objectively, again, not true. We already had 4 years of a Trump presidency, and all of the horrible stuff that the left was telling us was going to occur, him locking up gay and black people, all of this stuff, none of it happened at all. So he's factually wrong about the danger that he perceives of Trump, but he also doesn't make the moral case in this statement. Number 3, he says he didn't want him to be president of Trump University, let alone of the United States. And when he became a sitting president who would not commit a peaceful transfer of power, I viewed him as more dangerous still. However, I don't believe he's Orange Hitler. That's not going to be responsive anyways, right? Because the conspiracy that Sam was for, remember, was censoring the Hunter Biden laptop story before the election. So Sam Harris saying, the fact that Trump wouldn't accept the results of the election, that's why I knew how dangerous he was. Well, you didn't know that when this conspiracy occurred, which you supported. And in a way, you validated what Trump said. Although Trump may be, and I'm not even getting into the questions of were there ballots that were stolen, stuff like that. I've talked about that. I can't talk about that right now. I'm on YouTube, but I don't have to get into that. Let's, for the sake of argument, say that Sam's right, that there were no ballots, that everything was on. It was the most secure election ever. Great. We hear you loud and clear, YouTube. That's what we have to say. Fair enough. Most secure election ever. Great. Got it. But the thrust of what Trump was saying, by the way, one of the things that got me a community strike on Twitter was when I talked about the Time magazine article that said a secret cabal was fortifying the election for Joe Biden, including censoring stories that were critical of Joe Biden, and how that in itself is a conspiracy that's anti-democratic. By the way, brief aside, I know that most Democrats believe this, and I know that most left-wingers believe this. How? Because they think that 12 Russian trolls putting $50,000 of Pokemon Go and Facebook ads was an attempt to steal an election. So if they feel that that sort of effort warranted saying this election could have possibly been stolen or could have been corrupt or it's not justified, what would happen if almost the entirety of our intel agencies, mainstream media, and social media companies worked together in a conspiracy, not my words, YouTube, Sam Harris's words, in order to lie and censor people to help Joe Biden win the presidency? So in effect, what he's doing is legitimizing Trump's fears that the system was unfair. Sam Harris is saying that's okay. You're right. It was unfair, but it had to be unfair because you're bad. Well, where's your evidence that he's bad? Well, he wouldn't accept the results of the election. Right, but you were involved in that conspiracy and supporting that conspiracy before he didn't support the results of the election. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Next, he says, on the podcast, I was speaking narrowly about the wisdom and propriety of ignoring the Hunter Biden laptop story until after the election. I've always thought it was a very hard call ethically and journalistically. So he's saying, look, if there's corruption on the laptop, fine, we could discuss it after the election. Right, which is exactly what I said was happening. That's what would happen. Remember, I was talking about this earlier. The Democrats always do this. Once it no longer has the ability to harm their ideology politically, they say, yeah, we could look at that now, but it's old news. Who cares? Now that Trump's firmly out of commission, now that the election's over and we lied to you and we censored you, now we can say, okay, you were right all along. But by the way, trust us when we say you have to believe us and all this other stuff and we need to censor disinformation. Sorry that we lied and censored you when we knew we were. And remember, Sam Harris is saying it is his belief that they knew the Hunter Biden laptop story was legit and intentionally censored it. He said it was worth it. That's what he's saying here. Now, he tries to hedge and say, I think ethically it's difficult. Well, it doesn't matter that you think it was difficult. You still made an unethical prescription. So the fact that you sweated over it bears no mention to me. Next, he says, but given what happened with the Anthony Weiner laptop in previous election, I think it was probably the right call. What happened? That they intentionally sat on that laptop for over a month and a whistleblower had to speak up? That he felt that the FBI was corrupt? They were intentionally burying that story to help Hillary Clinton? That James Comey admitted that he assumed that Hillary Clinton was going to win and he didn't want this story to be an albatross around her neck? So he opened the investigation for 3 days, claims he went through 500,000 emails and then shut the investigation? That? Right. Lastly, he says, nothing I said in the podcast was meant to suggest that Democrats would have been right to commit election fraud or take other illegal measures to deny Trump presidency, nor do I think they did any of that. That's ridiculous. That's wrong. There is no reason that his principle wouldn't apply here. He admits that they engaged in a conspiracy to lie and censor people, and he says that it was necessary because his corruption was like the sun compared to the corruption of anyone else like Joe Biden being a firefly. So there's no reason to believe that it's like, yeah, I'm for corruption and conspiracies to lie and censor people, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that, that we should engage in election fraud. I would lie and I would use my influence to pressure social media companies to ban and censor people that wanted to talk about this legitimate story. But if I got a second ballot mailed to my house, I would never fill that out. Sure, sorry if I don't believe you, Sam Harris. So as you can see, his sort of mea culpa here on this thread actually does him no favors. The only potential positive of what Sam Harris said was he was at least honest when he talked in front, because he was comfortable. He thought he was in his bubble, so he could say, he's the big man, he's got some guys interviewing him, whatever their political beliefs. I'm the big man. Yeah, go ahead. I'm the big man. Intellectual dark web, 4 horsemen, go ahead, lay it out. Yeah, Trump's evil. Yeah, we engaged in a conspiracy to stop him. And then he's like, oh shit, this guy's a problem with that? Uh-oh. Oh, what's that? A bunch of people are picking up on this? Uh-oh. Time to go into damage control mode. Well, I